Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and we'll get this kicked off. And of course, the neighbor is doing yard work. Hopefully, Zoom canceling is doing a great job right now. Great time to use a leaf blower. So like I mentioned, I am super excited for this topic, which is near and dear to my heart. And that's how to set up your sales teams for successful negotiations. We're going to give you some background on why this is so important for RevOps to know. And we're also going to talk about where RevOps can jump in and actually add value in the negotiation process. So today's panel, I'm going to let you go around and introduce yourselves. Let's go on the order of the slides. So let's start with Christine.
Everybody, welcome. It's an honor to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm Christine McKay. I'm the CEO of Venn NCE. We are a professional negotiation service that works with mid-market companies, helping them negotiate with Goliath organizations, their largest customers and their largest suppliers, as well as doing certain mergers and acquisitions transactions.
Amazing. So many hoops, as you know better than anyone else. Lori, let's go to you.
Sure. And thanks for inviting me to the discussion. I'm really pleased to be part of this panel. I'm Lori McCarthy. I'm currently building and leading the deal desk at Core Search. I've been there just over 2 months. And I've been in revenue operations for almost 10 years, leading and building deal desks teams for over 5. I came to revenue operations with a background as a seller and a consultant in the telecommunications industry for many years. So I bring a pretty broad understanding of the needs of sales leaders, opportunity owners, operations, as well as external clients. And then I always like to throw in like a little fun fact about me. Many years ago, I actually sort of invented that recorded announcement that you hear when you call a medical or a healthcare facility where it says, if this is an emergency, please hang up and dial 911. And we did it on the fly. And I was actually part of a team that deployed one of the first sort of automatic call distribution and routing software for a large healthcare provider in the state of Illinois. But we wrote the script on the fly. And so now I hear it, it's like almost ubiquitous when you call any healthcare institution. So it's pretty funny. So that's my little fun fact.
Amazing. Raja?
That is a good claim to fame. I like it.
Right?
So I'm the founder and CEO of Revelier, and we are a very proud RevOps co-op sponsor, both for today's call as well as for the AF24 Festival in San Diego. So if anybody's there, we'd love to meet in person. And I started in the CRM business back at Siebel Systems in 1998. I've been doing it most of the time ever since. Most recently, I was the head of products at a company called Velocity that got bought by Salesforce. Our CPQ product became what is now the Salesforce Industry CPQ. And after a couple of years of being an SVP and GM at Salesforce, I started Revelier about 1.5 years ago with the vision of doing some things differently in that space. So we're excited to be a sponsor for the call today and participate in these forums through the RevOps Co-op.
Wonderful. So I'm Kamala Thompson. I'm representing the RevOps Co-op today, and that's all I'll say about myself. You see enough of me probably. So we're going to move to the next slide, and we're going to talk about, in addition to being a sponsor, thank you very much, Raja, for the RevOps AF 2024 conference. You're also going to be speaking there. So if you could also give us a little input on what your session's going to be about.
Yeah, just to very briefly talk about this session and this session, my company, and the session at RevOps AF. I've been, brief story. I had the pleasure of working with a very creative sales leader for a good portion of my career at a couple different companies, a gentleman by the name of Dave Arico. And Dave was famous for hugely creative, hugely big deals, which he loved doing pretty much the day the quarter ended. That's kind of how the guy rolled. And it usually worked, but in the process, none of the deals he did would fit within the software that we had, and there'd have to be a team of lawyers on call to basically revise all the documents as he was kind of making stuff up, and email approvals were flying around. And it was all great because the day after the quarter ended, it usually, when the dust settled, things were good. Until the auditors came in and you had to like explain what this wacky deal was that you had done. And so I tell that story because it was an inspiration for not only the topic we have today and the topic at AF24, but also the software we built. I mean, our vision was that many of the tools that are available in the revenue operations space are kind of too rigid to handle the creative negotiations that go on through the regular course of business. So we set out to develop Revelier with the idea of combining kind of the quoting process, the customer deal room, the approvals, the contracts, and e-signature all on one kind of easy platform with the flexibility to make everything work even when the deals get creative. So if you're interested in learning more, feel free to reach out to us. Now, we actually like this topic so much that there's an ebook we've put together. You'll get a copy actually in the coming week as a follow-up to this meeting, but you can grab a copy with that QR code on the screen there. And this kind of shares a lot of the experience about how to use term sheets as a negotiation tool and how to also equip your teams to negotiate successfully out in the field. And then at the AF24 show, we're going to take some of these same topics and talk about how to operationalize them, and the topic of AF24 is how to wring friction out of your big deal process. And so a lot of these things kind of overlap, and it's kind of been a passion of mine, because everybody loves a cool creative deal, but the reality is there are a lot of work and there's a lot of things that break in our tools when people do them. So we think there can be a better way to kind of combine all these things.
Fabulous. So today we're going to be really digging into negotiation and the different aspects of it. And I think this is fantastic because a lot of us in revenue operations aren't necessarily privy to those conversations, but we certainly deal with the aftermath. So I'm really looking forward to learning during the first half of this webinar and then really digging into how RevOps can help. So who's negotiating? Christine, I think I'm going to kick this over to you.
Well, depending on the size of the company, if you're in a larger company, you have a lot of players in the negotiation process, and some of them are visible to you and some of them are not. Anyone who has an approval authority is actually in the negotiation. And I always call them the silent negotiators at the table. And you don't, unless you're doing an effective job of incorporating those silent negotiators and those opinions into the negotiation, whether those are coming down to you from kind of on high from your executive team in your policies and procedures, all of those things, you're missing a huge part of the negotiation and what will make you successful internally. But it's everybody from sales to operations and how things get delivered, to customer service, to risk management, to procurement, to legal. As a big company, you have a large negotiation team, regardless of who is at the negotiation table. In a more mid-market company, you often have the salesperson, and you might have a small RevOps team, and you probably don't have risk management, and you probably have, only a couple people in legal who are occupied with a lot of other things. And the CEO or somebody from the C-suite is doing a lot of the negotiation. I see you have a contract negotiator down here, and that kind of sits in the legal department and kind of comes in later in the process under kind of a lot of the larger company structures. So overall, that's kind of who is negotiating. And one of the challenges for big companies is putting a point person, to Raja's point, as to who's driving the negotiation. And I do a lot of work with mid-market companies, and I tell my clients and I show my clients how to take advantage of the fact that larger companies don't have a single source driving that deal.
Really fascinating. So I'm going to open this up to the broader team, but what's being negotiated? Christine, let's start with you, and then Raja, if you want to jump in as well.
Well, I mean, as a negotiator, everything is negotiable. So, and a recent example, I was negotiating an IT services deal in the United Kingdom, and my counterpart had issued some policies and procedures, And when I went to negotiate them, their response was, those are not negotiable. And nobody gets to negotiate that. And, my comment back was, I respect your body of experience doesn't involve that, but my body of experience does. And, and they are, if they're incorporated into the contract, they are therefore negotiable. And so making sure that people don't sign up for things they actually can't deliver on operationally and from a policies and procedures perspective is absolutely critical.
Would anyone else like to jump in before we move forward?
Yeah, just a couple of comments on this. And, I think what's interesting here is I remember when I was, I don't know, maybe 21, 22, I bought my first car for the first time. And I remember going to the car dealership and the salesperson kind of giving me a number. And then every time I said something, he would run back to the sales manager, who was some person I never saw the whole time, who was kind of buried in the back room. And, they shuttled back and forth between the discussions. And it's interesting when we think about doing a SaaS deal, even if it's a 510K deal, or if it's a $500 or $1 million deal, our customers getting that same experience. Do you want to have separation between the negotiator who's on site, who's befriending the customer and buying them a steak dinner from time to time, versus somebody who's kind of brass tacks in the negotiation? And, I personally am a fan of, as somebody who buys a lot of things as well for my company, of having the person that's in the front line being able to make the decision and do things in real time. It's kind of frustrating when they're not. But there's also tactics on the other side that maybe you don't want that person to have that authority. Maybe you want to give the experience that they have to go back to the mothership, so to speak, to get approval. So I think it's a key decision you need to make when you're setting up your programs, because it goes into how much training and what kind of processes do you need to support that person on the front line. Do you want to empower them to negotiate, or do you want to have a process that lets them come back and get a quick decision and shuttle that back and forth to the customer?
Can I build on that for just a second?
Absolutely.
I agree with that, Raja. And I think one of the things is making sure that incentives are aligned to whatever model that you use. If somebody is only incented based on price, then that's the only thing that they're going to focus on negotiating. And I know what you're doing is broader to the term sheet. And so the incentive structure has to be different in order to accommodate that.
My first car was all about price, so that's where that comes from. And I know that, Laura, we talked a little bit this in our preparation call, of kind of the different philosophies on this.
I think one key component here is the acumen and maturity of the salesperson. So if they really understand not only, the product and the price, but they understand the business impact and the business risk with some of the, with some of the commercial terms, that becomes really important, because then they can not only articulate it properly, but they can help clients to understand why those protections aren't necessarily just on behalf of the vendor, but those protections are also there for the client as well. So that's really helpful. A skilled salesperson can be an outstanding negotiator.
I'll share another observation. As we were researching Revelier, I asked CEOs of actually some pretty big companies. And I said, well, how does when your sales team asks for the price, when they are putting a quote business down the table, like, how do they do it? What's the artifact, the document, the sales presentation, et cetera? And it was surprising how few people knew. My point of view is that most companies have a very defined first call deck that they train on and oftentimes make people stand and deliver and certify on. And of course, they have a legal contract that when you actually want to buy something, the lawyers have agreed to what you signed. But the middle part of that sales process, whereas most of the negotiation take place, is shockingly unscripted at most companies. And so it's kind of my point of view that you're leaving a lot in terms of how business terms are phrased, what business terms are discussed, at what point. Is it professional? Is it complete? A lot of organizations leave a lot of that in the hands of the sales team. As a buyer, I've had companies that literally will have one conversation with them, and then they'll send me their 20-page, 9-point font DocuSign to kind of wade through to figure out what I'm buying. And as a buyer, that's not exactly how I like to roll. I need some separation between the force majeure clause and the actual price I'm paying, and don't want to sort those things out.
One thing I always try to enforce with my folks is a contract is not a proposal. It is not marketing materials. So do not use a contract as some way to lead a discussion or something like that. It's not designed for that.
Yeah. Another good point of view, kind of a snippet is if your lawyers draft it, somebody else is probably going to want their lawyers to read it. So depending on what you send, you put yourself into a different kind of level of negotiation that you may not be ready for. My kind of point of view is if you've got a proposal and it includes references to detailed privacy laws and deep architectural technology facts or legal language, then your buyer is going to pull in their privacy experts, their architects, and their lawyers. And that may not, that's not necessarily what you're trying to be doing, what you're trying to do at certain stages of the sales process.
Agreed.
And I have a slightly different perspective on that, because what I have found in my career is that the cost of servicing an account sits in the contract. And if the subject of price starts coming up too early, and I haven't had the benefit of understanding what is embedded in the terms and conditions, then I'm assuming more cost than I understand. And that impacts the profitability of my overall relationship. And while I may be willing to accept a lower profitability deal, given the breadth of other deals that I have, I want to understand that as a trade-off and make decisions that are holistic, not just based on the marketing pieces that somebody has given me.
I love this emphasis on the why. I think that's skipped so often. So let's talk through how to prepare. Raja, let's start with you and then maybe move to Christina and Lori.
Yeah, I think so. Step one of the preparation goes into having a clear persona of who you think is going to be delivering the message to the customer. And if you have your most experienced team, or you have a contract negotiator or a second level sales manager, that preparation differs than if your expectation is that one of your first line account executives is going to be delivering the pitch. So the amount of training, the certifications, the experience they need will differ depending on who that persona is. So I think it's important to kind of set that up front. But a couple of things that I like to kind of highlight is the person presenting. If you present the customer with a quote, a deal, and to Christine's point, is that detailed points of the contract, or is that a high level quote, or however you define a deal? Can the person explain each of the terms? Can they provide a rationale as to why the term needs to be there? And can they effectively sell why it's reasonable? And so if you can't explain, hey, we've got a 99% uptime guarantee. If you don't have any talk track as to why 99% is a perfectly logical and good number to have, then the person's probably not sufficiently prepared. Because if you've got it in your deal, then it's reasonable for the buyer to want to ask a question about it. So that's kind of a gauge that I use is have a basically deal that you're presenting, that the person presenting it stays within their knowledge so that they can explain and respond and ideally convince the customer that what they're being presented is reasonable.
Christina, do you have any counterpoints here, or would you just?
I have a counterpoint, but in terms of the how to, so for our work, deals happen at the intersection of three things. They happen at the intersection of what you want and need, what your counterpart wants and needs, and the limitations that are imposed on it by the external environment. So when it comes to preparing, all three of those things have to be incredibly well understood. one of the things that I noticed when I worked in big companies, was a consultant, or even worked in mid-market tech companies, is that very few people actually understood their own company. And an example is that I had a meeting with the head of HR, and we were negotiating a really large telecommunications deal. And she's like, I don't know why you're meeting with me. And I said, 7 pages of this contract are HR related. Everything from how you do background searches to how you hire and train and how you fire, drug tests, the whole 9 yards. And I said, I can't agree to these things unless I have your input. And she had been an HR person for over 30 years and had never had somebody sit down and have that conversation. And so I think that whether it's meeting with customer service and understanding what they can do from a customer service perspective, what's the difference between 4 nines and 5 nines, right? What does that mean to you as an organization, was super important. And understanding, and a lot of companies don't actually understand what does profitable deal look like for them. And so they're going just on the top line revenue and they're not digging deep. And then it's understanding the counterpart, doing a ton of research on the individuals that you're negotiating and the company as a whole, and estimating or coming up with theories about what might and might not work for them. And then that's all overlaid by what's going on in the external market. So we do a lot of research, reading analyst reports on the industry, on the competitors in the market. And we look at all of those things to come up with a negotiation strategy. And we keep 5 to 10 questions in our back pocket so that we can test our hypotheses when we're sitting with our counterparts.
I would echo that exactly, Christine, and from a preparation perspective, if you know that your contracts typically, right, just from past experience, they typically need to be run past a procurement department, obviously a legal department, but an HR department, IT department. If that's the experience, then getting an audience with those people, sooner, getting draft language to those folks to start to run that in parallel as you're negotiating other aspects of the deal can be really important. I have also worked, it is not uncommon that if you are going to have a meeting or a discussion and you bring lawyers into that discussion, lawyers like to talk to other lawyers. So if the client, if you're going to bring your lawyer to the discussion, let the client know so that the client has an opportunity to bring their lawyers in. I've had once I'd leave the call. They won't even, if there's not 2 lawyers there, they won't even proceed. So just understanding who the key people that would typically review or they're a stakeholder in that agreement, and getting that information out to them sooner and making sure that you match those people, right? So that both parties have somebody who understand how that organization works within within the company, and what they would consider to be healthy or risk from, a contractual perspective.
Okay, we're about at the halfway point, so we're going to keep moving forward, and some of these points will be emphasized more, but let's talk a bit about framing pricing negotiations. This is definitely somewhere RevOps or Deal Desk can take a huge part of, but let's open this up to the panel.
I think we had when we were preparing for this call, I thought the discussion we had was kind of interesting, and about how the way, the basis on which you ask for the price has a profound impact on how the customer perceives the negotiation. If you have an itemized quote like you see on the right there as an example, and it says, hey, the discount is 10%, then the customer will negotiate every line item and talk about the 10% discount. If you bundle things together like you have in the middle, they'll maybe talk about the total. If you get into the rates, then we'll talk about the rates. So there's a strategy that goes into, I think, how the price is articulated, and when in the discussion the price is presented, that's very much within the sales team's control, and how it's done will send the customer off on that you'll basically dictate the terms on which the customer will respond and the way they'll make the ask.
Absolutely. From a deal desk perspective, I'm going to choose the middle, the summarized version every single time. Once, particularly a rate card, once you put a rate card in front of a client, then the savvy clients are going to want to memorialize that rate card into an MSA. And, 10 years on, you're still adhering to the rates that are in a rate card. So if you can avoid that, you'd like to. Same thing with the detailed quote, especially when you start to talk about specific percentages around discounts. I can't tell you, right? Then again, every single time, well, we get a 10% discount, or they will look for an opportunity to somehow write that into the agreement that, during the term of the agreement, we get a 10% discount, not only on this particular quote, but on any future business as well. So you have to be super careful about it, because again, savvy clients are going to want to memorialize whatever advantage that they see in terms of the pricing artifact that they're given.
And then Lori, just on the internal side and educating the sales team, have you had success? It's a tough balance to strike, because you don't want them to know the exact profit margins, but educating them about what the executive team will and won't approve and how to apply discounts to different line items. How proactive are you in that, or do you prefer bundling and kind of handling that on the deal desk side?
So we really want to educate the sales organization about a discount level that is under, sort of their jurisdiction. And if they go over that, then the guidance has come to the deal desk. So, and then at the deal desk, right, I've got a discount matrix of different levels and things like that. So, we definitely want the sellers to have some movement, right, to be able to negotiate something, right? It's not worth talking about if the client asks for, you know what I'm saying, 2% off. It may not even be worth the discussion internally, but right. So usually 10% and below, that's within the salesperson's, sort of negotiating range. Anything above that, that brings in some other folks for approval. They may be still leading the negotiation and be able to come back to the table saying, hey, I've got approval to go forward with a 20% discount or a 25% discount. Ideally, again, they're not talking about the discount. Maybe they're saying, hey, I've got approval to reduce the total cost of ownership here from $525,000 to $450,000, right? So as much as you can keep, the specifics around the the price movement from the client, the better. Again, savvy clients are probably, especially the larger clients that have gone through this with multiple vendors, they may very well come forward and say, no, we want an itemized breakdown. We want to see by SKU. We want to see the discounts, the list price, and all that good stuff. And, and then, fair enough, you have to open the kimono a little bit.
Christine, do you want to add anything?
So to me, and in my work in sales as well as in procurement, price is an answer to a math problem. And I don't care about the answer. I care about the math problem. And so what I found when I was working with sales teams is that most of them got into haggling situations over either the hard price or a percentage from a discount perspective. And they lost the benefit of understanding what levers existed in the math that got them to that price. And which is something that RevOps contributes to significantly, right? So that understanding that and educating the sales team on what that math is, so that where you can, so that they know what levers to pull, gives them a lot more flexibility in the negotiation versus if they're just haggling over a price or a discount percentage.
Oh.
Great point.
One last point before we move on this, this segues nicely, but for most of the RevOps folks on the call, ask yourself, your systems, your internal process probably output what's on the left of the screen. And if you want to get to something that's on the right of the screen, it largely is left to the discretion of the sales team to figure that out. And one of the things that I advocate is to try to standardize that. So if you If sales leadership and RevOps thinks that there's a better way to do it, make sure that your processes are outputting the better way so that your sales team can consume that and present that, as opposed to assuming that the sales team is going to break out their 10 keys and type it into a Word document and do those things to get it looking good.
All right, so RevOps and pricing. I love this. Lori, I'm going to let you take the lead and then we'll circle back to the other folks.
So, I mean, in general, particularly if you have a large and complex deal, mature opportunity owners know this, they're going to bring in and provide notice in advance so that the right people can be involved very early on. Because exactly right, there's going to be negotiation. So they're going to bring them in early on. Usually in terms of, deal desk can be a facilitator. I usually use it this way to bid review calls. So if you kind of determine deals that meet certain criteria or at a certain threshold, require a bid review call where you're going to go over the pricing and the terms, and you're really going to strategize about what is your approach to the negotiation. And that's going to include things like who's on point for specific discussion topics. And it's also going to include points about like, here's where we want to start and here's where we hope to end. And maybe also here's where we just can't end, right? Like at a certain point, we might be selling it at cost, and then that's just not financially healthy for the company. But a bid review call or a meeting well in advance can help to sort of, to strategize around that so that everybody's in alignment about what the messaging is and where we want to land from a pricing perspective.
And then I also think what's really important here is because the deal desk team is central and sees a wide breadth of deals, we often know before anyone else that we're losing a lot of deals to a competitor. So especially in a smaller company, as you're gaining notice of those competitors, maybe they're going to try to price you out of every single deal. I think deal desk can play a great role in escalating that kind of pattern to the executive team, or even making recommendations based on patterns they're seeing and competitive losses. And then also bringing up what's working really well in different segments. So maybe we have a product that fits into a few different niche areas, and some segments, certain pricing works better than others because they're getting a limited benefit from the product. It's great to level that up to the executive team so they can figure out, is this worth it doing if we have to bend a lot on the price, or is there a different version of the product where we're not sacrificing as much of a margin?
Yeah, that's a great point. We recently, provided some good feedback to the product team around, the different term approaches. So they had traditionally been selling on 12-month terms, and we were able to really, help them to see how clients were frequently coming back and asking for 24-month or 36-month because they saw that as a path to locking in rates. And the product team really hadn't considered that. And so we were able to sort of demonstrate that, out of the last, we'll call it 50 deals, but 15 of those deals saw red lines that were specifically trying to, ask for a longer term in exchange for, freezing prices. Then that was helpful for them because then they were able to develop an offering around that.
Yeah, don't assume that what's obvious to you is obvious to everybody else, because they may not be hearing the same things. Rush and Christine, do you want to add in?
No, I think in just there's differing points of view on this about how much competitive information or detail do you want to share with the frontline team that's in negotiation. Like if you know that versus a single competitor, you always need to discount to 40% to win, if that's what the data is telling you. Do you want the person that's negotiating for you to know that going in, or do you want to have a little bit of back and forth and try to get more of that price and go through that cycle? And I think there's valid arguments either way. I mean, I'm a little bit more of a fan of disclosing more and trying to get to the answer a little bit quicker, but there's others that like a little bit more of the back and forth to try to harvest the most of it. So I think it's But I think the good news, the prescriptive advice is you should be conscious about making that decision as an organization about how broadly you want to make that information available and what you hope to gain from that. Like we're going to give them more information in hopes of getting a faster negotiation. Totally valid strategy. We're going to give them less in hopes of harvesting more higher price points. Again, totally valid strategy, but it's good to pick one.
Yeah, and main point is escalating often and quickly to the executive team. If they want to decide on strategy and roll that down, that's fine, but at least they have the information they need. All right. So let me minimize our faces for a minute. Raja, do you want to start on this one? And then we'll kick it over to Christine.
Yeah, I think that when you think about, let's say you've got 10 or 50 or 100 or 500 salespeople in your organization, you potentially have a lot of negotiations going on. And so the question becomes, how do you kind of maximize the process for each of those individual negotiations? Because we all know that some of these by nature, go to the end of a sales cycle, a sales financial period, for instance. So how do you kind of set the process up correctly to make this flow smoothly? And the 5 points that I have here, I'll just very quickly touch on, we can discuss them. But one, first of all, teach your team how to sell their standard deal. The best negotiation is no negotiation, because you persuade them that what you proposed is totally reasonable. Secondly, what I found is always get the salespeople to get scenarios as to why the customer is objecting. So if a salesperson comes back and says, my customer doesn't like this because there's this corporate action or their business works this way, it can be a lot more constructive in how to respond. It's not just this person doesn't like it, so give them something else. If you have a scenario, you can actually solve for it with more precision. I'm also a big fan of pre-approved fallback positions. Like, hey, if it's the deal's over 100K, you're authorized to use this fallback. And then when all that doesn't work, make sure that the team understands exactly who needs to approve and what they need to capture in order to request that approval, so that you can be in a position to iterate pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Lord, go ahead.
Go ahead. I agree with what Raja said. I think that when you have standard deals moving through, you want to have your own process laid out as smoothly and as simply as possible. And everyone needs to know what it is and the time constraints that they have to act in, because in that process, there's certain levels of action, and sometimes people sit on those actions. But if it's a big negotiation, and you have somebody who has their own really robust, let's call it robust process for moving deals through their pipeline. I always tell people to negotiate that up front. Negotiate and agree on the negotiation process before you start talking anything else. Understand who's at what approvals, what the gates are, all as much of that as you can with the customer as early as possible. And I think this group can help facilitate that as that comes into play.
Lori, I'd love to hear from you how your team identifies these patterns and recommends proactively these sorts of things.
So one thing, I make sure that myself, somebody from my team, we're always involved in all sales forecasting calls. So right away, we're getting that insight, right? As soon as it's moving past the in-proposal process or something, or stage, excuse me, right? Then, and it's a large deal for, however any organization defines a large complex deal, then at least now we've got that first awareness, right? The second thing is, and depending, again, there could be specific criteria, i.e., oh, this is a government deal. And our experience tells us that government deals take a long time to negotiate. Then now we're aware of it. We know that it's a government deal. If an organization has the luxury of doing so, you want somebody from the deal desk assigned to that opportunity so that they can partner with the opportunity owner as it moves along, but also because even if just the role of the deal desk person is just to say, hey, heads up, this is going to require approvals. Let's start running that on a parallel track so that we don't, too often what ends up happening is things progress, and then everything stops because somebody goes, oh, well, if we're going to do that, then we're going to need to get an approval, or we're going to need to get some sort of a buy-in from somebody else, and then everything stops. Having a deal desk person in lockstep with the opportunity team can help to at least give that early warning sign of this, we're headed here, so let's get that ball rolling so that it doesn't hold us back and it doesn't trip us up.
Also tracking any special negotiations, whether it be payment terms, contract updates, that sort of thing. If you can give and roll up a percentage of deals impacted to your CFO or other people on the management team in order to argue for pre-approvals, that's a really good role for the deal desk.
Right. At least enough to start to say, hey, and I do this often. If I start to see a pattern from the approvers about stuff that they approve, I might suggest, okay, I'll be the approver. Do you know what I mean? Let me be your proxy, because I understand what your thinking is on this. So allow me to act on your behalf. And then, we can spend an hour or so once a week, once a month, going through the approvals that were granted. And then, I can solicit feedback. Maybe on one of them, you'll say, hey, I wouldn't have done that. And this is basic stuff like, do we really need to route an approval if the client is asking for net 60 versus net 30? Do you know what I'm saying? Should a CFO become involved in that?
Right.
My take is no, right? My take is I've seen enough to know that 95% of the time in my organization, that gets approved. So fair enough, right? I'll take that. And, and again, I'm close to deals, so I understand the puts and takes on it. But, and certainly from the perspective of if they ask for net 190, that's a different ask, right? Mm-hmm. Now I'm gonna take different steps.
Yep.
So Lori, I gotta stop you right there because you're stealing my thunder from my RevOps AF presentation, because that's exactly the idea. I mean, I've been, when we ask lawyers, a lot of the membership of this RevOps forum is in the tech space and in SaaS, and it's amazing how the same terms always get negotiated: limitation of liability, termination for convenience, payment terms. It's always the same stuff, and it always surprises me that the lawyers all know it's the same stuff. And yet there's not really any proactive formula that says, okay, in these cases, just do it. In these cases, absolutely don't do it. These things can be solved systematically. And if you try to pick 3 to 5 terms every quarter, you can kind of systematically get a playbook down for this. Having data is great, but the lawyers usually know what these things are anyways, right? It's not that tough to find them.
Just removing friction. Oh, that's in your title.
That's right.
So, RevOps and negotiations, we covered a little bit of this, but Lori, I would really like to start with you and then we'll move around.
So again, I view RevOps in negotiation as being sort of the repository of the governance that the company currently has. So, I can articulate what the company position is on something as a representative of RevOps. I can also understand where I think that there might be movement within the organization. Not that I would necessarily tip my hand about that. So RevOps understands the governance, right? Understands sort of the rules of the road, and they can, articulate that as part of a negotiation. RevOps can also understand, based on past, sort of when we've given that, what we've sometimes got in return is this. And so they can help to maybe provide a little coaching in that respect, right? If we're gonna give an additional discount, then maybe the ask is around, auto renew on our contracts or something like that. So they can help to say, based on, again, a history of seeing these types of contracts and these deals, if what could we swap in terms of a negotiation? And I'm trying to see what else we have here, but and as I think that last bullet point points out, hopefully having RevOps participate as part of negotiations is also a learning opportunity for the sales organization. Ideally, you want to get to a point where you have mature sellers who understand your organization, your business, and the constructs around what makes your business healthy very well, so that they can have these conversations when asked. I think it doesn't serve a company very well when you have a seller whose stock answer is, I got to go back and check. Let me go back and ask. Let me go back and ask. Hopefully they can at least articulate, this is something that we typically get approvals for, and let me tell you why, right? Let me explain why this is something in our organization that we tend to, look to get approval and buy-in from some of the key stakeholders. And I think that can be helpful.
Yeah, and sales, hands down, I think they have one of the hardest jobs in the entire organization. And when you're relying on one deal to make your number, and that one deal, it can change behavior and things can happen that normally people wouldn't do. So unfortunately, I've caught falsifying signatures. I've caught a lot of different things, and I joke with them, I'm keeping you out of jail, but we kind of, it's just really important to watch for that kind of behavior. Anybody else want to weigh in on this?
Well, I think it
Well,
goes.
just-
Go ahead,
Go ahead.
Raja.
No,
Oh,
I
I
was
was
just gonna exclamation point the coaching opportunity thing, because most organizations don't have very formal negotiation training, and so a lot of folks are learning by throwing stuff up against the wall. And the savvy buyers will know that, and they'll anchor their position when they sense the rep isn't fully aware of the positions. And so the more that the reps kind of understand where the boundaries are and they can nip the things in the bud, the buyers are probing, right? So they're going to figure out where the hard stops are, and it's going to make the whole process better if they know those things ahead of time.
And to both of those points, team negotiations are always more effective than one-on-one negotiation, because the incentive drives behavior. And when you're incented in a certain way to close just a number, some people they'll color outside the lines. And so having that process and having RevOps who understands more of what's going on across the whole organization is hugely valuable for the company in terms of having that more unified view. Yes, there you go. That's what I got.
I love it. All right. So gets and gives.
I think, Laura, you had a nice segue into this. And again, this goes under the idea of if the salespeople know the rules, if they know what they've got in their bag of tricks that they can play, you can get things done faster earlier in the cycle. You can potentially cut off different things like, hey, I need a free period. Okay, no problem. Let's do a 3-year deal instead of a 1-year deal. If they know that they can do those things, or they say, hey, I want termination for convenience. Well, why do you want it? Well, in this very specific circumstance, there's some things that you can learn to kind of teach the sales team as trade-offs, and also things that you can teach them are absolutely off limits. And I'm personally a fan of having more of that know-how being formalized. I mean, I think all this, sales managers and sales executives typically know this stuff, but a lot of times it doesn't get down to the front line as much. And I'm kind of a fan that it should, and that it's good for the folks to understand some of these items, at least the most common ones.
And if your enablement team isn't taking over this training, it's a fantastic opportunity to get more face time and actually some training time at sales kickoff, which usually RevOps, we try to train on systems and nobody wants that at a sales kickoff.
No.
Anything else to add? I know we're running up against time.
I think just be careful that not everything has to be, you want some things, you want to know what the parameters are in your gives and your gets, but in certain types of deals, you want to also be flexible. And sometimes we think we're going to get to an outcome in a certain way, and we can still, and they say no, and we can still get to the outcome, but through a different channel. And one of the keys in handling the negotiation is being flexible in how you get there, if you know where you're trying to get there, or where you're trying to get to.
Agree.
All right. So enabling negotiations.
This is a slide that I shared, so I'll just comment on it. And it's good that I think we've actually covered a lot of these topics throughout the discussion. But I think being good at negotiation across an organization starts by a common understanding. And I think Lori was bringing this up about what is actually being negotiated most commonly, and then documenting what is your playbook to that, and then educating the sales leaders as to how those things you've documented can be used and when. And again, I see that as a big blind spot in most of the companies I've talked to. The lawyers all know what's being negotiated, but there's not a formal mechanism to then recycle that and make that easier so that you don't need lawyers all the time. And then relative to the pricing point, if there's ways that you want your sales teams to present things that you think benefits the company, make sure that your RevOps processes, your legal processes, your sales ops processes are actually generating materials in a format that makes it easier for the sales team to do it that way. If you tell them to summarize everything, but then you give them a 5-page itemized quote, they're not always going to summarize it, right? So you want to kind of output it in a way that will optimize that. And then finally, I would argue to make a very conscious decision about how far down in the organization you want the frontline, you want your empowerment to go. Do you want your account executives to negotiate or not? Because that can actually drive the degree to which you need to train, the degree to which you need to document, et cetera, because everything's kind of based on that planned persona.
Yeah, there's a joke about billable hours and lawyers in there somewhere, but I'll open it up for other folks to comment. This is a fantastic summary.
Well, I love what Raja said, because believe it or not, there's a shortage of attorneys. So people assume that lawyers are looking at their sales contracts, and I'm here to tell you that they're not. They glance through and they look at the legal elements. Their job is to keep you out of court, both criminal and civil, and they're not looking at any of the commercial terms. And so, because they just simply don't have the resources and the time to do that. And so to understand, for RevOps is in the unique position of being able to understand the impact of all those commercial terms across the board. And that is hugely important in terms of enablement. If you're going to have the sales team do that, you have to have that degree of knowledge about the commercial elements.
For the deal desks that I've built, Deal Desk is the first point of review. So we're reviewing the commercial for all of the business content. Is the pricing right? Are the invoicing terms right? Do we have the start and end dates? All of that good stuff correct? And then we go to legal. So that, you know what I'm saying, kind of to your point, Christine. So legal already knows. They're just looking for the common legalese, right? And obviously, if you're using standard template documents that the organization supplies, now they're just looking for red lines, right? So that they can get their piece done pretty quickly, especially on common order forms or SOWs. That leaves them some bandwidth to spend, dealing with thornier ones like MSAs or, client paper that's not usually constructed from the perspective of, your organization. So having Deal Desk be the first point of review helps to get some of that commercial stuff cared for, so that you're just leaving legal with the specific things that they are already scanning that document for, so that you capture all of it.
And since we have only 1 minute left, Raja, I'm going to let you run through the remainder of the slides really quickly, just so we're sure that we hit the highlights on these. I think this is it.
Yeah, well, first of all, this book is free, so it's not this isn't a commercial ask here. But if a lot of things we talked about are summarized in this. It's about a 32-page ebook. We'll send it out to enrollees for the call, but if you want to get it right now, if you're in the mood, you can scan that QR code. This is a topic that I really enjoy. I think it's important to a lot of sales organizations. So hopefully a small contribution to the mix here on this topic.
All right, so I will, let's see here. So I will stop sharing. I wanted to give people enough time to scan that QR code. I hope people take the time to take the survey. We always want to know how we can better serve the community. And I hope I see you at RevOps AF in San Diego. And Raja, looking forward to seeing you there. Have a great day, everyone.